Good morning, everybody. Thank you for watching us today. I'm here with Paul Dupuis. He's the former CEO of Randstad India and former CEO and chairman of Randstad Japan. Currently, he serves as the Chief Enabling Officer at Take-5 Global and also as an external advisor to Bain & Company. Thank you for joining us, Paul, and welcome to India.
Well, thank you, Savi. It's so great to be back in, I guess, my second home here in India.
So how do you like it in India?
Oh, I love India. The 4 years I spent here in India, 2017 to 2021, were in a way game-changing for me, personally and professionally. Just a wonderful culture, made a lot of friends, and I think I put on some leadership muscle along the way. So I'm really, really excited to be back.
Right. So now you're back in Japan after serving 4 years in India, right? How is it different leading organization in India versus in Japan?
I think if you take the whole world and you put it on sort of a continuum, you've got Japan and India at the opposite ends, and every other country is somewhere in between. Right. Culturally, from a business practice standpoint, demographically, India is a very unique demographic story, as is Japan. Exactly opposite, aging society, declining birth rate. Then the speed of change. India, probably the fastest speed of change in the world. Japan is a mature economy, so the speed of change is much slower. It's settled, it's stable, which is also good. So kind of combining those two has been an interesting journey. But I have to say, leading in India and leading in Japan, there are some differences. But you know what? I made a discovery when I was living in India that some things about leadership are actually borderless and timeless.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anywhere you go in the world, regardless of the arena where you lead, whether it's business or sports or politics or journalism, there are certain presumptions about leadership. We will all follow a leader who is transparent, who walks the talk, who supports us in good times and bad. That goes beyond culture. So that's one important discovery. Yeah.
It's lovely to know. Coming back to the topic, Paul, we're in the month of June. It's celebrated as the Pride Month, right? For the LGBTQ plus community, its resilience, their advocacy, their quest for equality. Why do you think it is important to celebrate this month?
Well, this is an important question, and thank you for taking this opportunity to speak. It's something I'm very passionate about. Well, first of all, I think when we talk about ED&I, equity, diversity, and inclusion, then equality is part of that as well. When we talk about inclusion, inclusion is for everyone, regardless of the color of your skin, your gender, your sexual orientation, the language you speak, your education, and so on and so on. And this is part of the story. LGBTQ, the community is a diverse community. It transcends borders. And the good news is we're in a generational change right now. The fact that you and I are sitting here talking about this topic openly is a wonderful moment. So I say the first answer to this question is it's time. That's the first answer. Then, of course, the question we'll get into how. And we can talk more about that.
Yeah, let's come to how. So as a leader, what steps do you think an organization can take to advance their efforts toward inclusivity for the LGBTQ plus community?
Let's make a parallel to any change or transformation that you're trying to drive as a leader, because I would put that in a similar category, right? It's not specific and exclusive to the LGBTQ community. So first, it starts with the leader. Everything that happens in an organization when you talk about culture starts with the leader. Peter Drucker, the famous leadership guru, he said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? A company with great culture, where people are included, where they have a voice, where they feel safe, is a company that's going to thrive. We know that, right? So that's really the first step. Starts with the leader. The leader needs to walk the talk. The leader needs to be the champion of the cause. And in this case, the LGBTQ community, creating an environment where they can be themselves and they can thrive and be the best version of themselves. Starts with leadership. Now, beyond that, there are lots of things that we can do. The wonderful thing, as I said earlier, is that this is a very important topic right now. It's open. It's people are leaning in on it. And a lot of leaders that I talk to are not sure how to navigate through this. It can be tricky for a lot of leaders, because a lot of leaders grew up in a different generation where this was not a topic that was addressed openly. And so the next thing that leaders need to do is ask for advice. And the best people to ask for advice are the people who are on the leading edge of driving this theme. So I would say certainly partnering with people in the community, coalitions, alliances,
Right.
with those who are taking the lead on raising awareness around the LGBTQ. And of course, members of the LGBTQ community themselves should be involved in this mission. Beyond that, if you talk within an organization, absolutely the first key to making change is awareness.
Right.
In order to make change, you need to be aware.
Right.
So raising the volume on awareness, having more interaction, understanding, what is the LGBT community? What does it look like, and what are their needs, and what are the challenges, and so on. So that's really the next most important step. So it starts with the leader who should champion it, who should be loud and proud, of course, in the spirit of pride, but also it's about information.
Right. Interesting that you spoke about alliances. My next question is around that itself. Mentorship, as you said, really helps in that. Allyship. And also, it's not just about resistance from leaders, but also from your peers at the organization. How do you navigate that?
Absolutely. Let's take it back to the parallel to change. I think it's really important to talk about this topic, like any topic related to transformation and change. You will always have promoters, the ones who jump on board, who like change. You have the neutrals, if we follow the Net Promoter Score model, NPS. Right? You have your promoters, the supporters, then you have your neutrals who will kind of wait and see, and then you have your detractors. It's the law of numbers in any organization. So the promoters are your allies. They're the ones that can help fuel this movement, if you will. The neutrals will lean in quickly to the majority. So if the majority become promoters, the neutrals are in. The detractors. Now, before we criticize the detractors, I think it's first important to talk about this thing, bias. And there are two kinds of bias. We hear a lot about unconscious bias, but actually there's a conscious bias as well. And that comes from the way we were raised, the community we come from, and so on, the culture. So I think it's important also to address that. How do you address that? Education, interaction. The more that people are aware and myths are busted, the more people will move from detractor to neutral to promoter.
Lovely. So several studies show that diverse teams, they're linked to better performance, better innovation. Have you noticed that in your leadership?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we'll go back to diversity is not only about the LGBTQ community, but certainly they're a community that can add a lot of richness to any organization. We used to talk about ED&I as gender. It was very gender specific, right? Let's increase the proportion of women in leadership roles and so on. And by the way, the organizations that did that saw an improvement in the performance of the company. This has been studied again and again. The data is clear all around the world. So when you have a diverse environment, a diverse team, that means diverse perspectives, then of course you're going to have new ideas born and the company will thrive. It's no different with the LGBT community. It is a community, a diverse community with creative people.
Right.
That can add value to the organization. So absolutely. And in fact, a couple days ago, I was just reading a study that was done on this exact topic. This organization looked at 132 countries around the world, and they came up with an index in terms of the awareness and the openness and the inclusivity of the LGBT community in these particular countries and cultures. Then they went to companies in those countries, and what they found was really remarkable, that countries where the LGBT community was integrated more and there was inclusivity, where their voices were heard and so on, that the companies operating those countries performed better relatively to other companies that didn't have those policies in place. So it's quite interesting. There's clearly an economic benefit to a company to embrace the LGBT community.
Right. So you spoke about economic benefit. Could you elaborate on that? As a business, from a business standpoint of view, how do you think inclusion efforts can serve as a competitive advantage?
So let's go back to what I said earlier about a diverse team around a table. Many leaders, and I would say I was guilty for the early part of my career, we tend to fall in the trap of hiring mini-me, the mini-me syndrome, right? We hire people who are like us. That's human nature. We lean in. Oh, you went to the same school as me, or you're from the same town as me, or you like cricket, I like cricket. You like this particular team. We tend to connect with people who are like-minded. But what we find is that people who sit around a table who are like-minded come up with the same ideas. Right. And they have one perspective. Let's call it a vanilla perspective. Now, when you add in a kaleidoscope of colors around the table, new ideas are born. And this is where innovation is born. So back to what we talk about from a commercial standpoint, from a company that's navigating through challenging times. The world is changing so fast. Having a diverse group of people around the table has the potential to give birth to amazing, innovative ideas. And we see it all the time. I've done that. I call it the four corners. So we have the four corners compass meetings and pulse checks. Four corners means the four corners of the organization, agnostic to everything, level, gender, LGBTQ, title, etc. Having four-corner discussion, brainstorming, and so on, gives birth again to amazing ideas.
Interesting that you spoke about discussions because, in a country like India, there's still a lot of name-calling, teasing, bullying.
Yeah.
So what changes can be brought to the policy or the regulations of an organization to stop all of this?
So I'll go back to what I said earlier. It really starts with the leader and the leadership team. The leadership team needs to be completely aligned on a few things. One is zero tolerance on these kinds of things that you talk about, bullying in the workplace, regardless of whether it's LGBTQ or anything else. Yeah? So that's one. And there need to be policies in place. There need to be also education programs around harassment. Again, for a long time, a standard training program for leaders in any organization was sexual harassment training. We've all gone through it, and it became quite a norm. And in many countries or companies, it would be an annual exercise, right? So we need training on what is the LGBT community, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable in terms of interacting and so on. And sometimes the leader needs to make very courageous decisions. In the context of a company, this person may be a high performer, but they're not honoring the spirit of inclusivity. And then a tough decision needs to be made. Of course, coaching, supporting, and so on. But if they still can't come on board and get with the program, then a tough decision needs to be made.
Right. Speaking about these inclusion efforts, now you are leading an organization in Japan.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference in advancing in ensuring that these efforts are through the way in India as compared to in Japan?
It's a really interesting contrast, by the way. And since I left India in 2021 and went back to Japan, I read the news from India just about every day. So I've got one eye on India, but of course I'm physically in Japan. In many ways, the countries are similar. Traditional conservative cultures in many ways. So I would say, and you could say that's one similarity, although they're at the other end of the continuum. This is one that's similar. The awareness, the openness to talk about this topic in Japan is really a recent phenomenon. Right. It's quite new. Just a few weeks ago, I attended the Tokyo Rainbow Pride event. It's an annual event. It started about 30 years ago with about a dozen people. It's since grown. There were 50,000 plus people, more than 200 companies, both Japanese, multinational companies coming together, and a huge parade that basically shut Tokyo down for 3 hours. It was a wonderful event all over the media. And so what I've seen is this topic go from being in the shadows, being a bit tricky, avoided, to now being front and center, top of mind.
Stereotypical anymore.
I think it's a journey. It's a journey. I wouldn't take it as extreme to say. I think there's still a lot of people who don't get it. And again, back to what I said earlier, awareness, education, interactivity, inclusivity, and so on. On the India side, I see a lot of great things happening. Certainly the organization I was at before, Randstad, is doing wonderful things in India to raise awareness of this topic. And I think that, organizations can really take the lead. And when they come together and create an allyship, let's say, you could call this a coalition of companies that stand side to side saying, enough is enough. We're going to embrace anyone, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, color of skin, education level. When organizations do that, that has a huge domino effect on the society.
Great. Looking ahead, Paul, what do you envision for the LGBTQ plus inclusion at work in India, if we talk specifically about India?
Well, I think the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation is a step in the right direction. Probably one day we don't even need to sit and talk about this topic because it's a given. So we're not there yet. So that would be my vision. If you ask me, what is the vision of the future? And I think India is heading in that direction. India has a lot of things going for it as a country. And I could speak to you for hours about the potential of India. But on this particular topic, India is already an extremely diverse country. From north to south to east to west. And I've been all over the country. It's amazing to see the diversity in the country. And so, in a way, India is well poised to take the leadership position in the world, actually, on this topic. There's probably no more diverse country in the world than India. Although I come from Canada, and Canada is recognized as being pretty diverse, but I think India is on another level. So, I think the next 2 to 3 years will be very interesting because the pace of change, even in the past few years, has been remarkable. I would love to see more and more members of the LGBT community represented in senior leadership roles, proudly and openly across Indian organizations as well as multinational organizations. The same goes for politics, and we can go on in all the arenas, where everyone should have a free opportunity to participate.
Lastly, Paul, any last piece of advice for your fellow leaders leading in India to be more inclusive at work?
Well, I mentioned earlier about unconscious bias and bias. They're really both are there. Sometimes we just don't know. And so it's important to look in the mirror from time to time. But I would encourage all leaders, who are watching and listening, to do something that I did. Be proactive in engaging with the LGBT community. Invite them into your community, your circle, and then encourage others from your community to interact. And that interactiveness, that inclusivity, I think is so important. Again, ED&I, inclusion. Maybe we should add interaction as well. It's so important. Right? And then ultimately, let's remember one of the key missions of a leader in an organization. Of course, delivering results is important, but I would say even more important is first creating an environment where everyone can be the best true version of themselves and they can shine. And believe me, when the leader does that, the organization will have lots of success.
Thank you so much, Paul, for the great interaction, for the lovely insights for the viewers. Thank you once again.
Thank you.